Well, a great event is taking place on April 22nd. It's an annual event called the Manitoba Book Awards. Classic 107 this year is very, very excited to be the official radio sponsor for the awards, and they're taking place April 22nd at the Fort Garry Hotel. In the studio with me this morning is the veteran broadcaster of 33 plus years. Terry MacLeod is in the studio. He's co-hosting the awards this year. Terry, good morning.
Hi, Michael.
Pleasure to have you here this morning.
Wonderful to be here.
And I see you surrounded by a whole bunch of books.
You should see my kitchen table if you think this is a lot of books.
You have to shove them aside to have breakfast.
Yeah. What you were there where you saw
yes,
that.
I did.
Because my house is always full of books. Mm-hmm. It is doubly full of books now.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing. Could be worse.
Well, it's my world, right?
Yeah, well, mine is surrounded by music and CDs. So every day I come home, my wife is like, okay, we got to clean up these CDs because they just keep piling up. So I know how it feels. So we're going to talk about some of these books that you've brought. First, tell us a little bit about, and you're well-versed in the Manitoba Book Awards. They've been around for how many years now?
29. This is the 29th year.
This is the 29th
Started
year.
in 1988 with the folks at McNally Robinson.
Oh, those guys. I think I know them.
Yeah. So they offered the first prize for the Manitoba Book Awards, and it just took off from there. And I think they fostered writing as well. This has always been a place, Margaret Lawrence and such, and Frederick Philip Grove. It's a province that's always been full of great writers. But when the Book Awards came on the scene and they took off, I think a lot of people said, I can write too. There's a good, and it can be financially beneficial to me to do that. So, we had Carol Shields in the early days, and David Bergen still writing. In fact, he's nominated this year. Miriam Toews, who did so much great writing here, set so much of her writing here. She's not living here anymore. Margaret Sweatman, who's still here. Sandra Birdsell. Allan Levine, who's nominated again this year for another one of his Sam Klein mysteries. Jake MacDonald has won in the past, and Jake is one of our judges this year. Barbara Huck, Wab Kinew, who won last year as well. And Katharina Vermette, who's a bit of a star on the national scene at the moment. So we produce a lot of great writers. The country pays attention to Manitoba writers.
Yeah, Beatrice Mosenier as well for In Search of April Raintree. I remember that one very well. And
that came out so long ago, and it was so influential that there's an award named for her now.
Yeah.
Because there's
amazing.
a whole genre of literature now that was inspired by April Raintree.
So that's, again, 29th year, 29 years from its humble roots. It is now moving up, I guess you could say, in the world and in terms of, location and that kind of stuff. And it's a big event. Before we talk about the event itself, what about some of the, you mentioned a few of the authors, Katharina Vermette and David Bergen and Carol Shields, and so many great authors come from Manitoba. What do you think it is about City of Winnipeg and Manitoba that the culture here? What is it about that brings such amazing authors from this province?
Winter.
Holding themselves up for the hibernation.
Well, there are a lot of things that we can't do outdoors. I mean, if you're a skidoo person or you're an ice fisherman, then the winter is your kind of place. But indoors, writing quietly, thinking, reflecting. I think also this is a very reflective place. There are a lot of cultural traditions here that have people thinking about the meaning of their lives and how they got here. I'm thinking about Allan Levine writing out of the Jewish community here in Winnipeg, or David Bergen writing out of the Mennonite community. And, Tom Goodman, who was nominated for a book this year, writing out of the Icelandic tradition. So there are a lot of people that are reflecting on their lives. There's a huge blossoming of Indigenous writing now, particularly in the graphic novel category. So there are, David Alexander Robertson, for example, is nominated 5 times in a number of different categories. He's a guy to really pay attention to. So I think it's a place where people think a lot and talk a lot, and we're big readers. There's and no small part due to McNally Robinson. I mean, it's the only store of its sort in the country that's, it had its origins here. Paul and Holly McNally, Ron Robinson, with their little store in Osborne Village in the beginning. But they decided very early on that this was a writers' community, and they were going to focus on that, and they were going to bring forward Manitoba writers. They were going to feature them always in the stores. And now, they've expanded a bit. They're in Saskatoon now, very successful out there. And they have, I'm lucky enough to be invited to McNally's to help them do onstage interviews with authors. So it's a huge thrill for me to get to stand right beside the writer and say, why'd you write that? What's that mean? What made you do this? And I've been doing this now for a number of years with them just as a volunteer because it's really fun.
Yeah, well, I know the place quite well.
And
I spent a number of years there.
So you did.
13 years.
I don't know whether you've been there at times when the store was so full that I couldn't even see the back, the very back people because so many people come out because we're readers and we want to hear from the authors themselves.
Well, I know it because my desk was right there where they used to have a lot of the presentations, and people would be surrounding my desk. I kind of felt like I was in a sea of patrons there, and I would just sit at my desk, my music desk, and try to see over them. And so I know, they've done an amazing job, and I think that as you say, they're a good reason why Manitoba authors are so well known, because they have always looked to support them and always looked to raise them to a higher level. And so now we're at the 29th year of this, and just before we're going to talk about the event in a sec, tell me about, you've got a pile of books here now. You've read a bunch of these books. As you say, they're scattered around your table for a number of weeks now. Tell us about some of the authors this year who you think are, number one, they've had more nominations than most, or some of the standout books from this year. Well,
on the table in front of us here is a book called Nami One's Drum, with the rather long subtitle of the story of a contested repatriation of Anishinaabe artifacts. Now, this book is a look at events that happened around a drum that came from the remote Ojibwe community of Pongassi, in northern Manitoba, close to the Ontario border. Now, this is a deeply traditional community, and the writer, Maureen Matthews, has had a long-time relationship with the people in Pongassi, probably going back 30 years. She has been a journalist. She's now the chief ethnologist at the Manitoba Museum. She's a deep thinker and a deep writer. She told the story of Nami One's Drum originally in a different way, in a series of documentaries that won the National Award from the Canadian Association of Journalists. This is a look at the story of this drum, which was in a little museum at the University of Winnipeg. At one point in the history of this drum, it was either seized or taken by the American Indian movement. They came up from Wisconsin. They went to the museum, and they said, this needs to be ours now. They took it and a number of other artifacts. And so Maureen heard this story, and she tried to figure out what was the significance of this drum? Why did they want to take it? What did they do with it? And what does the American Indian movement, what connection does it feel to what's going on in Pongassi and to this drum in particular? This is a deep, complex book, beautifully illustrated. There's lots of Ojibwe in it, translated into English. Roger Roulette is Maureen's collaborator on this. He's probably the country's foremost translator of Ojibwe. And he says in Pongassi, their Ojibwe is so gorgeous, he says, they speak Shakespearean Ojibwe in Pongassi. That's how intact and gorgeous their Ojibwe is. So Maureen decided to try to figure out, and she went and confronted this guy from the American Indian movement at his house in Wisconsin. And there's a scene at his kitchen table where I thought a fight is going to break out here, because she's being very firm with him about what the heck he's doing with these things. And she came to be persuaded of his perspective in a way that she didn't expect. And so the American Indian movement is now, from what she comes to believe in the course of her research, that the American Indian movement is the new way to reflect indigenous spirituality in North America. Whereas what happened in Pongassi for centuries before the settlers arrived was an indigenous spirituality, but it's gone now.
Mm-hmm. So it's historical, yet it's a story.
It's a story.
Yeah.
Plus, it is, if you're really interested in cultural anthropology, there's a lot of very deep stuff in there. And if you want to read Ojibwe or teach yourself Ojibwe, this might be a good place to start.
I'm in a conversation with Terry MacLeod. We're talking about the Manitoba Book Awards, which are April 22nd, coming up a week Saturday, taking place at the Fort Garry Hotel. He is co-hosting the awards, and we're getting some ideas to what types of books are nominated and getting some insight into these amazing, not only stories, but authors as well. So tell us about, there's this one that was nominated for the Canada Reads, correct?
Yes, that's Katharina Vermette. And
Katharina Vermette. She's a past winner.
The Break.
She's a past winner.
She has been, and she was nominated for the Writers' Trust of Canada Award. She was a finalist in the GG80, the Governor General's Award. She was just on Canada Reads, or her book was, with Chantal Kreviazuk defending the book.
Oh, Winnipegger?
Yes. I mean, I think that was the kind of logical link between Chantal and Katharina.
Yep.
This is a difficult story, I would say. It's about, it revolves around murdered and missing Indigenous women. It's set just off McPhillips near Selkirk, in a part of that neighborhood that is referred to as the Break. It is a piece of land with a hydro line running through it. And the language is raw in the book, I have to tell you. It's have been surprised as I read through it. I think I'm going to stay with this, even though I find some of the language to be pretty rough. But it is been very well thought of across the country. This is the kind of breakout book from Manitoba that's making a big mark on the national scene this year. We know we've had writers before, as I meant, Miriam Toews or David Bergen, who break out nationally and internationally from here. But this is the book now that a lot of people across the country are paying attention to.
Well, we get a lot of attention for just that subject, correct?
Yes.
So
yeah.
So it has to be tackled. It has to be tackled, as you say, almost raw in its natural form, because it seems to have the most impact, I guess.
Yes, and plus there are a lot of questions that need to be answered. I mean, we know there's a story in the news. I heard it in your news this morning about the murder charges relating to an Indigenous woman who's missing. Now they haven't found her remains, but they're charging a person with her death. So
so timely.
But so many other books. I mean, there's a great deal of levity in the writing as well. I have to tell you about this book, which is called Giant's Well. And this is a book.
It's a big hardcover book.
Written and illustrated by Scott A. Ford. This book is 20 feet wide.
20 feet wide.
20 feet wide, because the book is made in an accordion format. The pages are all folded, and there's a story that unfolds going down into the well. And I better be careful, because I'm accidentally unfolding it. I laid it out on the kitchen floor last night. I think it's more than 20 feet. I think it's probably 22 feet. 20.
Do you have a tape measure that goes that far?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I laid it out just to make sure. But this is written and illustrated by Scott. He binds the book himself. This is... he has a huge website. He is a graphic novelist. He's an illustrator. And there's some stuff in the back of the book that tells the story of how this came to be, why he did the images that he did. And there's some photos of him actually putting the book together. He hand binds each one of them.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a book like that before.
I have never.
Never.
And so there's a big movement now, as I mentioned, into graphic novels. And this one, Rust and Water, is also one of those exceptionally beautiful books. Fantastic illustrations, vivid color. And this is a kind of book that both adults and kids would like, because there's a movement now where adults who read comics as kids are coming back to graphic novels, and they get engaged with them in a whole new way. Another beautifully illustrated book is this one called Dinosaurs of the Deep. And these are about the aquatic dinosaurs which ruled what's now the prairies in central North America. This, again, these are marine reptiles. This is by Larry Verstraete, and this is published by Turnstone Press. Beautiful, full-color illustrations on every page. I couldn't put it down. I got to talk to Larry on stage about this because it was just so much fun. And I've explored some of those dinosaurs myself in the ridge outside of Morden. You know, they have the big museum in Morden with that crazy huge mosasaur that's 80 feet long. But up on the ridge outside of Morden, you can go there, and if you look really carefully, you can still see where the bones are being excavated. And if you look out across from the ridge on the little escarpment there and imagine it being full of water that goes all the way to Alberta and all the way south almost to Texas, then you get a sense of the scope of these dinosaurs 80 million years ago.
Wow.
Great book.
So there's a number of awards. And again, just to mention, I'm in conversation with Terry MacLeod. We're talking about the Manitoba Book Awards. We're the official radio sponsor for that award. And 29th year. They're in their 29th year, the Manitoba Book Awards. To get information, tickets, manitobabookawards.com. Tell us a little bit about the event. This is obviously it's to celebrate the authors, but there's some kind of unique things about the event.
Well, it's at the Hotel Fort Garry on the evening of the 22nd. Lara Ray and I are hosting this. Now, you might know Lara, stand-up comic. She just finished the Winnipeg Comedy Festival. Huge success again this year. A very funny person. Will make me seem way more intelligent, I think. Will help me. She's also, I have to say, the most well-read person I have ever met. She reads incredibly widely. And so being with her, presenting these awards and talking about these books is quite a thrill for me. Now, this year as well, the folks from the Manitoba Writers Guild who put together the Book Awards wanted to create a Book Awards ceremony that was worthy of the writers and the publishers. So they created an event, an elegant, dare we say, kind of glamorous event at the Hotel Fort Garry. This has been going on in Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC for years. And the Writers Guild looked at the awards ceremony, which had been very, very modest over the last quite a few years, and said to themselves, let's raise it up a bit.
Yeah. Let's be un-Manitoban.
Exactly. Well, let's be Saskatchewanian. Let's
glamorize
Let's do as well as they do, right? Or let's do as well as Alberta does.
Not be so modest.
And exactly. And this is the home of such great writing. So why not create an event that's going to be, a wonderful meal? There will be a writer or two writers at every table.
That's what I kind of like. I think that's kind of cool.
Well, they have this new project inspired by the Writers Trust, the national group, and they said, well, let's see if we can do it here. So they've worked. They've got sponsors now who are prepared to help these writers to attend. So if you're looking for brilliant conversation about books, you're going to have a writer at your table.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, not only a good dinner, but you get to see all the awards, you get to hang out with authors, and it's opportunity. Again, you said this is kind of the first year they're notching it up a little bit.
Yeah, and so if you're a reader, it's
who isn't,
right?
Yeah.
And you want to hang out with other people who love books, and you want to talk and argue and discuss. I loved that book. I hated that book. I loved that book.
Yep.
Those Sam Klein mysteries from Allan Levine. I read his first trilogy. I don't know how many years ago it was, like maybe 10 years ago. And he's back with the first new one called The Bootlegger's Confession, which is about the beginning of, it's inspired by the beginning of the Bronfmans in western Manitoba in the early days of American Prohibition. It's quite a tale. You can walk down Cathedral Avenue in Winnipeg and you will see where the detective lived, his Sam Klein detective. It's so Manitoba specific that in a certain way you can look out into the city, even though this book is set in the teens and the 20s, the characters live again in this really vivid way.
So check out their website for more information about how to get tickets. It's manitobabookawards.com. And they list all the short list for the prizes, and there's so many we can't go through them all possibly. There's just too many.
Which book would you like to give away to your listeners?
I think we're going to do this Abandoned Manitoba. It's called Abandoned Manitoba: From Residential Schools to Bank Vaults to Grain Elevators. It's kind of like it's a neat historical perspective on Manitoba with some amazing photographs. It's the kind you just want to keep on your tabletop, and just
this book
browse
is
through
a
it.
huge bestseller.
Yeah, tell us quickly about this one, and we'll give it away.
It's in its fourth printing now. They've sold more than 5,000 copies. It came out in November. Now, the book, oddly enough, had its origins on the radio show that I used to work on when I was over at the other broadcaster.
Yes.
And Gordon Goldsborough and I and Jan Harding-Jeanson cooked up this idea of creating a radio series about the lost and forgotten places of Manitoba. And I had come across Gordon years ago. He's a biologist at the university, brilliant guy. But his total obsession as a volunteer is with the Manitoba Historical Society. And so we got talking about this, and I said, why don't we do a series for the radio? And the series, I've since left the radio program, but the series is still running. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly successful. And then the folks from the publishing company saw or heard the series on the radio, and they said, we need to turn this into a book. So they approached Gordon, the folks from Great Plains Publishing, and said, would you turn this into a book for us? So Gordon knows so much about Lost and Abandoned Manitoba. He said, absolutely. So, and he asked me to write the introduction for the book, mm-hmm. which I was thrilled to do because I felt a little bit like the kind of godfather of the book in a certain way. I have to tell you, my writing of the introduction has nothing to do with the book being nominated. Mm-hmm. It's just, I had nothing to do with the process. All I'm going to be doing is opening the envelopes with Lara. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what's in them. I don't know who won. But this is a terrific book, and Manitobans have voted with their dollars buying this book. It's still on the bestseller list.
So it's called Abandoned Manitoba. Mm-hmm. And in just a few seconds, we're going to be giving that away. Terry, it's been a pleasure.
Michael, thank you so much.
Have a lot of fun.
I will.
With the awards.
And thanks so much for inviting me down.
Yeah.
You've got a nice place here.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Come on by anytime. You're welcome.
Right.
Any morning. I know you're up early in the mornings.
Up at 5 today.
Still. 5 o'clock. That's sleeping in. Anyway, I've been in conversation with Terry MacLeod. He's co-hosting the Manitoba Book Awards. Go to their website, manitobabookawards.com. Get your tickets, get at a table and chat with an author, enjoy some great food and conversation, and be there to celebrate some of the fantastic authors as they, some new authors, some very well-known authors as well. Great opportunity to do that. We're going to take one more break, and I've got time for one more right after this.